Welcome to Story Time. I wanted to talk about my history with, I guess, playing video games in Mexico, more or less. I'm first generation in this country, and my pops would ensure that every year we would get to go visit his hometown. Like, that was like his big thing that he saved for. Sometimes it was like Disneyland or something fun like that, but he'd always make sure to save up for our yearly vacations to go visit family over there. Here in America, I grew up very like old school, literally like as it comes. You know how like you hear your grandpa talk about like Atari and stuff like that. I think that's gonna end up being my role because we had a just straight up an old school NES is what we grew up here. So I literally grew up on straight up the first three Mario Brothers, little Duck Hunt. Like I remember firing the gun at the CRT and like cheating sometimes, like just putting the gun really close to the screen and hacking the game that way. But stuff like that is what I grew up with. Is literally like I remember blowing air into the cartridges and to get them to work sometimes. Growing up in the 90s, when I got my next console, it was the original PlayStation, which wasn't until like I was like, I think maybe 7 years old or so. So Y2K console right there. But that was like the first thing I actually owned. Everything was all Nintendo. Mexico had this vibe of like, this is where we send all of our consoles, all of our old things to. That way, like family over there, like they don't get as much. Like I'm sure they'll be very grateful to get it. So like, let's send it over. But it was real striking because here in America, it's like, I remember like when I first got my PlayStation, like a lot of the games, like we did tons of rentals because like not Blockbuster, but a local video store is literally you cross the street and you're there. So like for example, I remember playing Ape Escape for the first time on the PlayStation and being real frustrated because I only had one controller for the PlayStation and it didn't have the dual shock, whatever, but it didn't have the joysticks attached to the controller. So I literally sat there with a rental wasted the whole weekend and I was like, damn. And even for like when we had a Super Nintendo, it was like cool. It was more Mario and stuff like that. But I remember getting the boxes new, like it was like, whoa, like you go to the store, you go to the rental place or whatever, and that's your gaming for like the next couple of weeks or months. Cause you have to, if it's not a rental, you have to space out what you get. Even if you got like licensed nonsense, like some type of Rugrats game or something like that, like you had to make it last because that's all you were going to get for a little bit. In Mexico, it was a very different vibe. Like, I don't know if this is the case now, still to this day, because it was really hard to find anything official for games over there. Like, I didn't go to like a big city. Like, we didn't go to Mexico City. We'd go to Jalisco, which is still like, it's a big, I guess, part of Mexico or whatever. But definitely not like you go to the store like you do here, right? Like you go to a Walmart or a GameStop or whatever, and there you go. Like you get your games there. It's like, no, it's really hard to find. Like if you find a console, for example, it's going to be the crazy upsell just to get one, But what was really rampant in Mexico was honestly tons of piracy. Like it was such a different experience walking through swap meets over there, which, I mean, for whatever reason, if you don't know what they are, it's just literally like, imagine tons of canopies and tents and you walk through like just this big part of town that's been closed off. It was a great experience because it's like you walk in, your mom gets to do her type of shopping. She picks up her pots, her pans, her clothes, her like whatever she wanted, pretty much like, vacation. And then along the way, it's like you get tons of fun, like churros and like little like papitas and stuff like that, like just straight up snacks, freshly made, like fruit cups, like the works, like ice cream. There would be for sure, I would know every time we would go, like 2 or 3 spots just dedicated to game stuff, consoles and like official games and stuff like that. Like in the older gens, like say if I was going in the 2000s, it was dirt cheap to find like Nintendo and Super Nintendo stuff. Just like that's was my whole like 90s collection, like I owned so many Nintendo, Super Nintendo games that I picked up for real cheap. And I think that was the only reason I had like a decent like SNES collection, was like you go pick up like just random stuff. Like I'm telling you, it was real shovelware. Like I picked up like, what are the latest videos I did? Like Dennis the Menace, Mario's Time Machine, like stuff like that. But also great games, like Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country. Mexico, like I put it this way, it's like a little bit behind in trends. That might be different nowadays because of the internet and how much that has changed or whatever. Kids obviously back then were totally content to like in the 2000s still be like hooked to the Super Nintendo. Like they didn't even use RCA connectors for their Super Nintendo. Like I remember straight up having to hook up into the optical, like, and you'd have to like browse like a different channel on every TV that you wanted to play your SNES on. But they were perfectly chill with like, yeah, like it's just 2002, but like go hook up the Super Nintendo, you know, like let's play some Mario Kart or something, you know, let's go. And even when it came to piracy, like I remember before I got my PlayStation, like I actually was able to play it through a different cousin's house that lived in Mexico. And again, this could be different now because this is just, I'm talking about my childhood here. You are typically made to work at a really early age. Like I know my old man, for example, started working when he was like 8 years old. And I'm very grateful that I never had to experience that living here in America. But my cousins had a PlayStation that like they kind of dug it. Like they were usually made to work like the little shop that they worked at, which was awesome. Like I'll go on a bit of a tangent for a second here because in Mexico, obviously there's no Walmarts, there's no big easy retailer stores like that. I think eventually we got like a bigger market in my hometown, like one or two. Everything more or less was bought at just like straight up mom and pop shops. Like you'd find them every couple of blocks on every corner. And yeah, it was just straight up like, I remember my cousins, it was basically like a side room they had, you know, like on the other side of the shop was literally like their bedrooms. And like, yeah, they would just run it and be like, the sister would run it, the cousin would run it, my aunt or uncle would run it, whoever was available would just open, you know, and run it. And it was real handy because like, you know, your allowance goes real far in Mexico and you could just, I go hang out with my cousins and it's just like, yeah, let's just pop in literally the next room, you know, and just buy some chips. Did I bring them with me? Let me see, because that would be cool. A little bit of a show and tell. I'm able to do a little bit of a show and tell here. Like this is my proof, you know, like they call these in America, they'll call them pogs. And I try to show them up to the camera as I'm talking. So it's like, yeah, you just straight up would go next door and like, it was perfectly like a kid's paradise, honestly. Like you would just straight up buy like chips and snacks and sodas and stuff like that. And yeah, after you get your snacks and stuff, it's like, let's go hook up the PlayStation. But tangent over, I remember specifically like the PlayStation that they had, like had this like extension. That's all I can describe it as, like this adapter that hooked up to the back of it. And I remember thinking that was really unique because like the PlayStations that I had seen in America, like there is no port or whatever for that in the back of it. So they literally had to get it modded by someone, I'm assuming, that they knew to hook up the adapter that let them bypass like whatever piracy protection was on it and just like play whatever the heck they wanted, you know, burn it to disc. Again, at the swap meet, when you would go, like more or less everything was pirated. Like here's a slight show and tell. Like I think this is like the only official like game I ever got in Mexico. And besides Super Nintendo stuff, but a real obvious example of it was like Pokemon Sapphire. Game Boy cartridge for that is usually blue, and the one that I grew up with was just a normal Game Boy. It looked like this. It looked like this one because it wasn't official. You know, it's just some guy that made it. And same with the PlayStation discs, you know, they were just burned discs, like they weren't official. They had so many games I got to try, like off the top of my head. Croc, Legend of the Gobos, I think I talked about that in a video recently. That was my first 3D platformer, just straight out. And it made such a humongous impact on my taste. It was like just seeing the 3D world. I was like, what? Like this could be in 3D? Just how charming it all was. The sound design, the soundtrack too, like it's pretty spectacular in Croc, and just how fun and vibrant and honestly pretty challenging the game is. You know, it's very dated, I would say, for its time, very like tank controls, but it's something that I go back to every now and then because it's like, it's fun to think of the memories. And like my cousins in Mexico, like they just have like their own terms for it because they knew I was a little bit like stubborn and like they knew I liked it. So it was typically the first thing that they would play whenever I was over and wanted to do the PlayStation. But tons of other games too, you know, like Chocobo Racing, I think I got to experience there. I think I got to experience straight up like the original Resident Evil there. Like I just was really scared of it, so I didn't like, you know, get into the series as a kid because it terrified me too much. one thing I noticed that was very different about just gaming there was like, what? Like you could just like there's so much out there and like you could just pick it up whenever you want. And I know it's wrong. I know piracy is wrong. I guess it's more of a gray area maybe now because it's so old. Like some of these games you could find them, I guess, like I don't know, like on the PlayStation Store, like in re-releases, remasters, or just like legacy collections. But back then, obviously, it was like pretty like up to date. You know, like those were the games of their time, and so it's like very like okay, like you're technically stealing or whatever. But again, gray area, like technically, I mean, the income level in like Jalisco is like okay, that's its own conversation too. So I don't condone it, I guess, or whatever, but it's like it is what it is, if that makes sense. And I'm like happy I got to experience it. I ain't gonna lie, like I got lots of pirate stuff in Mexico growing up. And even again, like the hand-me-downs are really unique, you know, because like my uncle, the youngest, I guess, of like all of my dad's siblings, like I was pretty close to him growing up, still am. When he was young and working, you know, he would be the type to like, well, I'm gonna keep up with like modern media, everything, you know, like he got me into like a lot of cool music, the way he dressed, like I think even was like, damn, that's cool, you know. So I think even now, like I have a little bit of like that hint of how he dresses in my own sense of style. He would buy also just like at random, like tons of like games and consoles that he just thought were cool, you know. So like I got to experience so many like interesting consoles that I didn't own growing up. Like I experienced like the Sega Saturn over there, and that was my first experience playing like the original Rayman. That was a lot of fun. Like it, and I think I talked about that recently too. It influenced me a lot. Some motorcycle game that I can't. If anyone knows the name of it, it's this motorcycle game where like you can beat up other riders as you're riding around. And I think if you like lose or if you do a certain thing, like the cops will pull you over, and if they catch you, like they'll straight up show you a cutscene of you getting your ass beat, like they just arrest you and stuff. I got to experience the Genesis over there, but weirdly enough, I didn't play any Sonic. I think we played like, if I remember right, like Vector Man. I remember that vaguely. Echo the Dolphin for a brief second, I think too. But I was like, you know, I was like, I think 6 years old, and I was like, whatever, this dolphin thing, this is cool. But I don't. This is like, why would why would anyone play as a Mario? I guess is what I was thinking maybe at that age. And just like culturally, you know, like it's real interesting to see how that like video games have been just a humongous part of like I want to say Latin America in general, really, but like obviously being Mexican, like I can see it like in the taste of like kids over there that were my own age, you know. For my cousins that I grew up with, you know, it was the same I think for most kids here in America in the 90s, where it was like, okay, gaming was fun, it was like a thing I did, but it's not really like my passion, it's not a thing I kept up with. And I would say the same is true for my cousins that I grew up gaming with over there and all the stuff they were into. Like, it's cool, but you know, it's not really my jam. But I see people online, you know, like there's this artist, for example, like I can't remember what his name is. I'll have to like literally put it on screen, unfortunately. But I really admire his work. And his style is like he just recreates scenes, environments, and stuff from Mexico, like the stuff he grew up with in this original PlayStation Mega Man Legends type of style, which also, by the way, is how I experienced Mega Man Legends for the first time. And I was like, I have to like freaking like play this like at some point, like fully, you know, and I ended up doing that in high school. And it's probably one of my favorite series of all time. But yeah, his art is like very reminiscent of that. And like I see tons of discourse and discussions and stuff online where like, yeah, like I also grew up the same way. And like, do you remember this? In Mexico, like I associate it with like getting to try so many weird, like unique games I wouldn't have gotten to try because like I didn't never saw them as hand-me-downs, you know. It was just like, that's awesome that you own this. Like, this is like, I love games, you know, like let's dive in, let's have fun. Like I never owned a Saturn or a Dreamcast, and for a little bit I didn't own a PlayStation, never owned a Genesis. And so to see kids that grew up over there having these same experiences where it's just like, yes, do you remember tianguis? Like that's what they call the swamp meets over there. Like, do you remember just straight up like having to like see like just pirated games everywhere, you know? The experience of like the hand-me-downs, you know, like they're bringing in clothing and video games and toys and stuff from America. Your aunt, your mom, your uncle, whatever sent them over. And at a young age, like I remember really wanting to be a storyteller. Like I wanted to make video games, you know, and all the stuff that I got to try over there. Being in Mexico, it's like you, as a kid, you could just go out wherever you wanted, you know, and you go out and see the town, you go out and explore nature, the parks. Like it was very critical, I think, to my development. And like I'd imagine exploring like the town over there and seeing like just waterfalls and like ranches and farms and the smell of cheese factories just horrible. And but you're like, dang, like this is how it's made, you know, like yeah, it's like ranch life, you know, they do it all there. There's no like Mendocino farms that you go to all nice and spick and get it all there balled up and packaged. It was like a very different experience. And if I do end up having like the luck to make video games, like I know that a lot of my adventures and stuff, exploring, just being a kid, biking around, is going to play a humongous impact on the games I make by like association. You know, it's also going to have an impact because I did so much gaming over there, and the games that I grew up with really like loving, I think. Not that I didn't love the Nintendo and like, you know, the original Mario Brothers and stuff like that, but the games that I got to really like, wow, like this is awesome, you know, like this is really establishing my taste. I think I would link back to all the gaming and stuff I would do in Mexico and just like growing up with cousins that are like, what is this word? Like, I don't know what the characters are saying, you know, like that played a humongous role in, I think, my life, really. Just how different it was, I think, back then, gaming, you know, Mexico versus America. It's a really different experience. And I'm sure it is now, even. Try getting like PS4 in Mexico. I'm sure it's impossible. But other than that, let me know if you also grew up in a similar, like maybe you're a different Latin America country or something like that, or maybe you're just a completely different country altogether. You know, like I know the EU has its own, right, gaming scene. It's like the PAL region or whatever. But yeah, let me know if you have any, it's like very related type of experiences, because I mean, it was real critical, real developmental or whatever for me. And I love hearing stories like that. Other than that, this has been Backseat Gaming. Remember to subscribe too. Thank you for watching this far. If you have, otherwise, please support the channel if you can. And I'll catch you guys very soon.